Hello, everybody. We'll get started in just one moment. Welcome to the Global Action Week for Education Coalition meeting hosted by the Global Campaign for Education US. My name is Jennifer Rigg, and I serve as Executive Director at GCE-US. Please introduce yourselves in the chat box with your name, organizational affiliation, and location. For today's event, we have captioning available in English. For English captions, you can click on the CC at the bottom of the Zoom screen to turn on the subtitles. We want to have as much interaction with all of you as possible throughout the event, and we invite you to pose questions and comments in the Zoom chat box. Today's event will showcase global and youth leaders who are working to ensure the human right to quality, inclusive education for all. We will discuss the barriers and opportunities to advance education, as well as recommendations to take forward. Given that this year's Global Action Week for Education focuses on the right to education, especially in emergency settings, special attention will be given to work to support students living in emergency settings, protected crises, and all types of emergencies around the globe. For participants in the US and with US-based colleagues, we would especially like to encourage you to please take action and contact your members of Congress today when key committees in the House of Representatives are finalizing funding requests right now. You can find resources to engage in legislative advocacy for the reauthorization of the READ Act in the chat box. We would like to introduce you to two wonderful GCE-US student fellows, Farina Anton Lopez and Annie Lynn, who will be co-chairing today's session. Farina is a master's degree student at the Georgetown Walsh School of Foreign Service, where she is also a 2021 USAID Donald M. Payne Fellow. She has worked with the International Rescue Committee to connect unaccompanied youth migrants from Northern Central America with education and trauma support services in the US, and previously taught at a teacher training college in Cambodia. She is particularly passionate about advocating for the right to education in emergency settings and equipping students with the social emotional skills needed to succeed in the 21st century. Welcome, Farina. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for welcoming me to the session. And thank you so much to everyone who is joining our call today. Annie, my co-chair, is also a student fellow with the Global Campaign for Education US, and she's currently a student at George Washington University studying international affairs with a focus in international development and economics. At George Washington University, or GW, Annie has served as a director of mentorship and director of community outreach with GW First Gen United. She previously worked with Inkuleko, a nonprofit organization that promotes education access in the township communities of Makanda, South Africa. Annie is especially interested in engaging with GCE-US coalition members and other advocates to further improve equitable education access for all. Today, we will hear from young activists, NGO representatives, and global leaders in the promotion of education and emergencies around the globe during GCE's Global Action Week for Education. Every year, GCE chapters around the world highlight regional and national priorities focused on an annual theme as we work together in the movement for education for all. This year's theme will be held under GCE's Protect Education in Emergencies Now campaign, with the objective of ensuring that the international community take effective, immediate, and deliberate action to protect the right to transformative, inclusive, and equitable education for students in emergency settings. Globally, 75 million students have had their education disrupted by conflict, and we've come together today to issue a call to action for governments and the donor community to strengthen the access to education for all students, including those who live in conflict and emergency settings. We so look forward to learning from each of you and each person joining us today. The full speaker bios are included with the agenda. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Yasmine Sherif, the Director of Education Cannot Wait, ECW, the UN's Global Fund for Education and Protracted Crises. Yasmine, over to you.
Thank you very much, so I can see you all. First of all, thanks to the Global Coalition for Education and to Jennifer and everyone who is part of this great coalition, because you have really made it possible for ECW to grow so fast and be able to mobilize the resources that we need to actually translate political will into action on the ground. Without financing, there's very little we can do. And Global Coalition for Education, GCE, has just done an amazing job. I'm full of awe before you and look forward to seeing you all, as I mentioned to Jennifer, end of May when I plan to go to DC. And for those of you who may not have heard of Education Cannot Wait, we are a global fund for education in emergencies and protracted crisis. We are hosted by UNICEF, but we serve not only the whole UN system, we serve civil society above all and local communities. So we have a foot in both worlds, and we focus exclusively on children and youth who are caught by emergencies and protracted crises such as armed conflicts, refugees, internally displaced, and climate-induced disasters, and also during the pandemic, COVID-19. And thus far, and to a large extent with the help of GCE, we have mobilized 1.1 billion in our trust fund. We're not even 5 years yet. And we have invested in 42 crisis-affected countries. We have reached 5 million children and youth with holistic, child-centered quality education, and 30 million children and youth in response to the COVID-19 response. So very rapidly growing, expanding, but most importantly, deepening, because it's important for us to ensure that there are learning outcomes and a quality education, holistic approach. Now, when it comes to gender education, I love the brief that we produced, the Empower Her. Empower Her, it's all about empowering her and her humanity, I would say, so that she can exercise all her human rights and therefore bring sustainability, peace, and reconstruction to their countries affected by conflict. We need 50% of the population in every country to be able to rebuild and to withstand the shocks of crisis. So it's all about empowerment of her. And working with young people is important because young people usually have not just ambition, but they have a vision. And they also have the passion and the enthusiasm and the strength, and are less bureaucratic and actually more accountable to the children, and especially the girls that they serve. So I'm very honored that we do this directly with young people and your call for action. Now, when it comes to transform education for girls, it is important that we don't just speak about numbers, but we also speak about the protection issues they face and to transcend all the barriers that hold back girls' education, adolescent girls' education, because we see a very stark picture presented when we look at crisis and emergencies. We used to speak about 75 million children and youth who were affected by crisis and emergencies, of whom 39 million were girls. This was just a few years ago when Education Cannot Wait was established. But today, as a result of COVID-19 and new conflicts, such as the one in Ukraine, or a change of regime in Afghanistan and elsewhere, we have seen an exponentially growth in numbers. And our team in Education Cannot Wait are now calculating the precise figures, but I can tell you already now from the briefing I had yesterday, we're speaking about over 200 million children and youth, of whom half, 50%, are girls who are not accessing a quality education simply because of their gender. And Malala Fund and many others have stated that about 20 million of these girls may never ever return to school. And those who are left furthest behind, they're all left furthest behind because they're in conflict by default. They're always left furthest behind. And that's why financial resources by ODA donors, by private sector, have to go to them first. The one who is the weakest and the furthest behind needs to be the first recipient and empowerment. And amongst them, it's the refugee girls, it's the refugee children and youth, especially the adolescent girls that are absolutely furthest left behind. And if you have an adolescent girl who also has is living with a disability or another ability, you can bet that she is absolutely left furthest behind in a corner with very little opportunities to ever enter into a school. Now, UNFPA has estimated, due to the pandemic and conflict, if it continues like this, we will have an additional 13 million child marriages, because that's what happened. When a girl doesn't go to school, she's not empowered. She'll be married away by the age of 12, 13. And that is also related to extreme poverty. She also has no means of asserting her rights because she hasn't been educated. We've also seen a significant increase in gender-based violence. And we also know that the cycle of poverty, because all these crisis countries, there are extreme poverty, far below the poverty line. We know that a girl or a child whose mother can read and has a minimum of education, that 50% of them are more likely to survive and live beyond the age of 5, and twice as likely to attend school themselves. So the mother's education will inevitably impact on the child and definitely on the girl's education. And as it stands now, only a quarter of the poorest girls who are in crisis countries are able to actually enter secondary education. And we know that without secondary education, there's no real empowerment. Primary education is not going to empower you. It's going to give you the basics, but it's not going to empower you with the full spectrum of learning, and certainly not qualifying you for tertiary education to become what many girls dream of, to become teachers, to become nurses, to become lawyers, engineers, doctors. It's not going to be possible if you cannot continue to higher education. And UNHCR estimates that 52% of refugee girls at secondary education may never ever return to school again as a result of the situation today. And as I mentioned earlier, you have Afghanistan, where we are now working very hard behind the scenes through also informal dialogue with the Taliban regime and with strong local organizations on the ground, such as the Swedish Committee for Afghanistan, the Afghan organization WADAN, Aga Khan Foundation, and UNICEF and others to drive the right for all secondary adolescent girls to return to school, which had been promised earlier this year. They know that some have returned in certain parts of Afghanistan where local negotiations have taken place. In Ukraine, in South America, in Africa, you also see that when girls are dropping out of school due to conflict, the war economy is set in motion. And at the core of that war economy is trafficking of girls. We fear to see an increase of trafficking of girls as a result of the Ukraine conflict. We see it in Africa, and we see it in South America, and of course, more other forms of gender-based violence. So they are the ones we need to focus on. And when we are out to mobilize the finances, we have to constantly tell our strategic donor partners, focus on those left furthest behind, and amongst them, those who are left furthest behind, namely the girls. Their education cannot wait. They're the furthest behind from reaching the 2030 development goals. We got to focus on those who are in the worst position. And through education cannot wait, because we are so designed for conflict, crisis, climate-induced disasters, and forced displacement. We have a target of 60% girls in all our investments. And that means, again, not just 60% girls, but the curriculum, protection, the changes of normative thinking around girls, working with the boys to understand the girls' rights, and also training the teachers and investing in them to have gender-sensitive teaching. And I'm happy to announce that Education Cannot Wait, our fund, since our inception, we have all our ECW, over 95% of our programs have focused a minimum and achieved and equal access for girls to education. We have a very strong girls' education agenda. It's one of our top priorities. Working very closely with PLAN, International PLAN UK, the Global Youth Panel, where we have 16 youth leaders through the Youth for Education in Emergencies. And we work with them not only to go to school and learn, but also to have the confidence to empower them to become leaders and agents of change. And in our new strategic plan, which we are developing now for the period of 2023 and 2026, gender equality and girls' inclusion, especially adolescent girls, is our absolute top priority. And this also entails working very closely with local women and girls organizations. We've got to ensure national ownership. And we have many good practices of that from Pakistan, Burundi, Cameroon. So it is possible. And it's also the most delightful you can do in your service, is to see the local organizations, the women's organizations, girls' organizations taking the lead. We are also a member of the Global Call to Action on Protection from Gender-Based Violence in Emergencies, and of course, a staunch supporter of the Global Education Cluster for non-refugee situation and UNHCR in refugee situation. So I think I've said a lot, and I will conclude here, but I would say that when you go out there and you advocate, then we have the strong youth advocating, and GCE with its very powerful advocacy network and voice, 12 years education for girls and adolescent girls, emphasis on secondary education, and the coaching, the guiding to become leaders and really be able to advance and achieve their potentials and engage the local girls and women's organizations. If you do this together, nothing is impossible. We can make it happen. I'm happy to see so many women and girls in the meeting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yasmine, for that very inspiring call to action on the importance of transformative gender inclusion education in emergencies. We're so thankful for your support. I would now like to pass it over to Carron Mann, Research and Policy Manager at the Malala Fund, to speak on girls' education in emergencies and key calls to action from the recently published Afghanistan policy brief. Carron, over to you.
Thank you all, and thank you to GCE-US for inviting me here today. Malala Fund, as Yasmine lovely set me up for, Malala Fund is committed to realising 12 years of free, safe, quality education for all girls, and our response to the crisis in Afghanistan really focuses on girls' secondary education. In the interest of time, I'm going to rather badly skip a lot of necessary background and a lot of details, which I'll make up for by sharing resources in the chat afterwards. I'll also share my email so you guys can pose any questions to me through there as well. To situate Malala Fund's recommendations, I wanted to unpack the context in Afghanistan a little bit first. And here, I'd like to make 3 points. The first is that the Taliban, as the de facto authorities in Afghanistan, are using a combination of political tools and violence to create a climate of fear and oppression for women and girls, with girls' secondary education very much at the epicenter of this. It's very much the top of the iceberg. On the 23rd of March, in line with Taliban commitments, many girls' secondary classes did reopen, but within hours they were ordered, often under force, to reclose. And this seemed to settle a lot of debates about this new Taliban and their approach to girls' education. And for some, it reaffirmed how contrary girls' secondary education is to the Taliban ideology. For girls, it was beyond devastating. Many of them bravely took to the streets in protest. The Taliban responded with force and responded with additional policies further curtailing the rights of women and girls. More than 1.1 million girls in Afghanistan continue to be affected by this ban, and over 200 million learning hours have been lost. The second contextual point I wanted to raise is the responsibility of the international community. Since August, the suspension of aid, freezing of foreign assets, and ineffective sanctions have actively driven the economic crisis. The Taliban's failure to reopen schools last month saw continued suspension of education aid. And in addition, donors have met little over half of even basic humanitarian aid requirements. There was a pledging summit on the 31st of March, and a little over 55% of the $4.4 billion was reached. Of this, less than 10% is for education and emergencies. My final point, contextual point, is that the situation today in Afghanistan is very bleak and very desperate. Prior to Taliban takeover in August, it was certainly very difficult. And since then, the multiple and intersecting crises of humanitarian, political, economic, climate, COVID, and in some areas, active conflict continue to drive girls further and further from education. Crises, I always think of crises as having like a multiplying effect on barriers to girls' education, both in terms of creating new barriers and exacerbating underlying and long-term barriers. And Afghanistan's no exception to this. I think what is quite acute for Afghanistan, or is quite pronounced, is the fragile situation in August before the Taliban took over, and how much worse things have got and continue to be. So within this quite complex context, Malala Fund makes 4 recommendations to the international community to both hold themselves and the Taliban to account. We wrote the paper that I'll share in the chat afterwards in March, and we published it on the 21st. So I've tweaked these recommendations a little bit based on the situation over the last month and developments over the last month. The first recommendation is pretty simple. It's fund education. In the report, we talked about shoring up the education system, or components of the education system, in a way that didn't recognize the Taliban politically. I think at the moment, particularly after the pledging summit, it's very fundamental just to fund education, make sure that 10% of humanitarian spend goes to education and emergencies, ensure that teachers are paid through alternative mechanisms, and fund alternative secondary education pathways for girls. Our second recommendation is to prioritize girls' safety. This primarily focuses on support for communities, civil society, and particularly women's groups, echoing a lot of Yasmine's points earlier. And it also includes international human rights monitoring and prioritizing girls' safety to and in humanitarian learning secondary opportunities for girls. Our third recommendation is around education quality, and that means holding the Taliban to account for maintaining the current education curriculum. And our fourth recommendation is ensuring women's and girls' full participation in negotiating an inclusive political settlement, recognizing that this is key to addressing the multiple crises facing Afghanistan, long-term stability, and the realization of their rights. Indeed, women's and girls' political participation is a right in of itself. Women's and girls' rights must be a non-negotiable condition for the political recognition of any Afghan government, and that is very much a red line for us at Malala Fund. I've raced through a lot because I only had 5 minutes to speak, but I don't know if we've got time for questions and answers. As I said earlier, I'll happily stay on for a bit and answer things in the chat and add my email as well.
Thank you, Carron, for sharing your critical call to actions and your recommendations. We highly encourage you to take a further look at the Malala Fund Afghanistan policy brief that is linked in the chat. In addition to Carron's important insights, we've also heard from Yasmine Sherif to reaffirm the commitment of the international community in ensuring that emergencies, conflicts, and protracted crises do not impede the human right to education. In 2019, there were over 127 million school-age children, students, and youth living in crisis-affected countries. This represents almost half of the global out-of-school population in total. And there's no doubt that education is a determinant of successful economic and social growth and development in any country, and is critical for the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. And is also simply the most impactful, cost-effective, and proven way forward. Next, we are so excited to introduce our panel of inspiring and powerful youth activists to give their view on the barriers on what they themselves and their communities face in realizing the right to education and opportunities for change. I am delighted to first introduce Rantia Sabbah, a Palestinian therapist and psychosocial support facilitator, and a representative with the Arab Youth for Education. Next, we have Charie Atilano, a member of the Youth Council for ENET Philippines, working to advance food security. We have Taibat Hussain, Senior Technical Advisor at the Development Research and Project Center in Nigeria, and a passionate gender equality and education champion. And lastly, we have Diana Ayala, a graduate of pedagogy, education planning, and administration, and a GPE financing 2025 youth leader. Diana works for Foro, Dakar, Honduras, and represents the Latin American Campaign for Education. Welcome to all our amazing panelists.
Now we'll move on into our kickoff session. Each panelist will be asked to briefly identify what they see as one key barrier to education in emergencies and propose one solution to combat it. We ask panelists to please keep their response to 1 to 2 minutes because we have a very tight agenda. And let's start off with Taibat. And then from there, after you speak Taibat, please feel free to pass it on to the next youth panelist.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe, just like it's been reiterated, gender is a key barrier to education in emergencies, and the education attainment of the child is particularly compromised by social conflict, wars, and attack. We have research to back it up. The Safe School Global Community revealed that girls and girls' schools have been the primary target of such attacks, leading to girls missing out on education. So what can we do? There is need to reform the education system in conflict-affected and prone states by putting in place mechanisms and policies that are gender equitable, so all girls have an uninterrupted right to learn and can continue to learn during emergencies and also return safely to the walls of their classrooms after, the crisis. And this could take many forms. For instance, it could be through providing access to temporary learning spaces, as well as provisions of digital learning materials. I believe we must go beyond, surface dressing issues around education in emergencies to actually tackle these barriers headlong to ensure that we are leaving no one behind. So thank you, and over to Diana.
Hi, well, Pierina just introduced myself before and the colleague, so I'm just gonna go ahead with the question. And some barriers, I think that I have 3 of them, and I'm gonna summarize all of them. And one is having girls permanent in school. It's not only about accessing school, but also about continuing education until they graduate and for the rest of their life, because the education is the right for the whole life, not just for one stage. Also about the lack of opportunities that they affect also the families, and that makes girls staying home also, or boys and girls going to find a job outside and dropping school, and the lack of semi-formal programs and different programs for different capacities of children and youth. And also we have some, like the refugee children, they're very often not fully integrated into the education system of their host countries, which severely limits their educational achievement, and it can also lead to them becoming discouraged and dropping out of school. So I think one change we need to have is building and installing also capacities and working hand in hand with civil societies and governments to create policies that allow girls to access the same opportunities as boys, and also to have a quality education that also teaches about gender and sexual reproduction, health, to prevent the highest rates of teenage pregnancy on girls, that makes them quit schools and also to be segregated from formal system.
Thank you so much, Diana. Charie or Rantia, would you like to go next?
I'll go. For me, I'll keep it very, very brief, but I think one of the, from my own experience as a Palestinian, coming from a constant context of violence and conflict, I think one of the main, most important things is that what we see for education is resilience. I think when people don't have that much choices for them to choose between whether they want to go to their classes, to their school, to be within their age and friends, one of the things that happens within the psyche of the person is that they would want it even more. And I think in Palestine, one of the main things that we see within children in school is the constant resilience and powerful, active with their own fight for education through their day-to-day life. I think this we can take in consideration and pour more awareness onto it, and more awareness when we say that it's not about the student, it's more about all the sectors within the system of our government, within the system of the international active organizations. And I do believe that all sectors should be involved and active within fighting for the education and the right to education for all of the people. And it shouldn't be a choice, a matter of choice. It should be a duty for them to fight for. It's not only education, it's a haven for all of the children. It's a protection tool for them. So I think when we say about the key messages that we want to get out and fight for, it's not the importance of education in separate of the context itself, but the actual having the education as a protection tool for all of our future generations. So thank you.
Charie, on to you for your key message on one key barrier to education in emergencies and one solution to combat it.
Hello, I'm sorry, I will not be able to open my camera because my internet connection is acting up. So, so for me, I think one of the barriers in education in emergencies is the lack of support and opportunities that is given to the students, to the youth. So especially here in the Philippines, there is such a big increase in the numbers of out-of-school youth now because of the pandemic going on and any other factors that are affecting the education right now. So one of the things that I would recommend is to focus more on education. I mean, every one of us wants that because we are advocating that education is a basic human right. So yeah, I think we should the government should focus more and put extra effort on supporting the education sector, especially that as we said, it's the basic human right. And also how do you call that? My English is. And also, like, as we are experiencing right now, the budget that is given to the Department of Education is not ideal, and it causes a lot of different problems on the grassroots level of the students. So that's why I think the government should put more extra effort on the education of every student.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Your ability to quickly identify these education barriers and solutions should be a wake-up call to governments everywhere and other decision makers that our voices, youth voices, matter. I'd like to pass it over to Annie now, who will moderate our discussion on how to promote transformative education, psychosocial support, and social and emotional learning approaches to learners and youth who are living in the context of emergencies. Thank you. Over to you, Annie.
Thank you, Prerna. I now welcome two speakers who are going to share about their experiences, advocacy, and ideas for ensuring that we not only listen, but also center the voices of those who have had their education interrupted by conflict, and to also ensure that psychosocial, mental, and emotional learning needs of teachers and students are met. So first, I would like to welcome Rantia. Rantia is a Palestinian therapist, psychosocial support facilitator, and the representative for the Arab Youth for Education. In her work, she focuses on destigmatization and decolonization of mental health in Arab society and advocacy for gender equity and education. Rantia, could you please give us an overview of your current work to promote psychosocial support for vulnerable communities, mental health and advocacy for gender equity and education?
Okay, thank you, Annie. So hello, everyone. My name is Rantia. I'm the youth representative for the Arab Campaign for Education for All. I studied psychology with double minor in sociology and women's studies. And right now I'm a psychosocial facilitator for communities most vulnerable to Israeli settler violence. Planning on continuing my study in developmental psychology and early intervention. My passion to be a children's psychologist right now stems from personally experienced traumatic events, specifically the military invasion of my hometown at the age of 12. Although I vividly remember these events, I was able to avoid the prolonged psychological pain due to my parents' awareness of emotional support. The same cannot be said for other Palestinian children who lived through these incidents and continue to do so, realizing from an early age that this support should not be privileged to some, specifically in a country that is under constant systemic violence, was the stepping stone for my passion in psychology, and which led me to be a psychosocial support facilitator right now. So one of the things that I kept persisting on enhancing my experience and understanding my community better. I started volunteering during the Gaza war, the war in Gaza in 2012 when I was in undergrad, where I realized that the continuous traumatic disorder was a common disorder between all of the hundreds of calls that we have received, specifically from children in Gaza. Leading to children developing anxiety, depression, and many other disorders, and to most adults being addicted to heavy drugs as a coping mechanism. So through this experience, I was able to understand the trauma-related psychological disorders amongst Palestinian and again, specifically children, where I saw firsthand what the lack of resources, expertise, specifically in a context like Gaza, can have an impact on children, and I came to a firmer belief that there is a pressing need for professional and psychological care, awareness, and support, specifically within our school systems and education. So during the previous years, I was professionally trained and later hired as a therapist in the Palestinian Counseling Center, and where I handled a weekly group therapy and individual therapy sessions for teenagers in the only juvenile center in the country. And again, I saw bright-minded kids, victims of their own environment. I was sure that if we had the chances and the opportunity to highlight their own experience, and if we have fought harder for their right of the education, these children wouldn't be in this context, going through this experience at this age. So I think one of the main things that we should, and after this experience that I've realized, is the policy change, the importance of policy change when it comes to integrating mental health within our school systems. Again, it's education is the hub for all the protection tools that we can protect our children from prolonged disorders and from prolonged anxieties and depression and stresses, specifically in a context this same as Palestine. So from these experiences I went through, I knew that my people in general, specifically the ones who live in a conflict context, have an amazing resilience that empowers them to self-heal. And thus, building on my current experience as a psychosocial support facilitators, I plan on developing and formalizing initiatives focusing on psychological support, gender education and livelihood training in underprivileged Palestinian rural areas, and hopefully after my obtaining my master's degree in this, so I can be a trustworthy source of experience and source for my people.
Thank you, Rantia, for sharing your story and your powerful advocacy. Would you mind telling us a bit more about some possible recommendations that you have for improving psychosocial support and socio-emotional skills for students and youth impacted by the conflicts?
I think when it comes to Palestine again, Palestine is a collective society. So it revolves around the group, the people, the family. So I think one of the things after these experiences that I obtained is the importance to have a support group from all of your society and community. For that, to do so and to achieve this, awareness is a key integral part of having this support of your community, because there's a lot of stigmatization on mental health and the importance of it, and the connection of mental health to the political situation in Palestine. This is also another level of underlying violence when it comes to disorders, especially with children. And it limits their voices and limits their resources or obtaining these resources. I think one of the most important thing is raising awareness, working for advocacy on the importance of mental health and its connection to the political situation, meaning that it shouldn't also be separate from the reality. So a lot of times we separate our individual psyche from the collective or from the society. And in Palestine, I think what we have to work on is connecting the importance of mental health into every part of our life. And first of all is education and curriculums.
Thank you, Rantia. I now would like to introduce Charie Atilano, the Youth Council for the Civil Society Network of Education Reforms, also known as ENET Philippines. Charie is in her last year of senior high school, taking humanities and social sciences. She is also the vice president of Sinkama's youth organization, a youth-led organization that mainly focuses on food insecurity issues. Charie, please share an overview of your organization and how your work contributes to support for students and youth, and how food insecurity can threaten education. Over to you, Charie.
Thank you, Anna. Again, hello everyone. I am Charie from ENET Philippines. So ENET Philippines is basically a coalition network in here in the Philippines. We are consisted of more than 50 youth-led and student-led organizations. ENET Philippines has been committed in reforming the Philippine education system and developing alternative learning system with special concern for the marginalized, included, and vulnerable sectors. Youth organizations have been undertaking their education advocacies and campaigns even before they have joined the ENET Philippines. And it must be continued that way it is going. Now that they have come together to strengthen the youth group, what is needed to find common grounds and doable actions as a group to pursue the call for education for all of the Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG 4. aim to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, which is the very foundation of ENET advocacy. Believing in the vibrant and significance of the youth involvement in shaping and education system that will empower them to assert and defend their right to education, to be informed citizens and be included in decision-making and governance and fulfill their obligations of responsible citizenship. The civil society network live sessions wherein our goal is to maximize the use of so during the COVID-19, since the COVID-19 pandemic has started, ENET Philippines also released different kind of live sessions where we tackle the different factors that are affecting the current situation of the education in the Philippines. And as also mentioned, we are also in concern with the food security. Personally, I am a volunteer of Community Pantry PH, if any of you would be familiar with it. So basically, as I entered the Community Pantry PH, I realized that food security is one of the biggest factor that is affecting the education sector because it is very vital and it is very important to secure that every student, every youth, or even not the students should have something to eat 3 times a day or better more than that. Because here in the Philippines right now, a lot of different things that are happening is really so right now we are not really supported that much in terms of education and in food security. That's why we started the Community Pantry PH to help our fellow Filipino to have something to eat and to help them survive the day. Basically, Community Pantry PH did not just help with the food security, but also it has been the coping mechanism of other Filipino in terms of mental health, because in the community Pantry PH, we did not just answer the issue of food security, but also it creates a platform in the community for people that has no one else to talk to during the pandemic. Also, the Community Pantry PH has awakened the bayanihan spirit of the Filipinos, which helps a lot mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And also through the Community Pantry PH, we have heard a lot of different inspiring stories from different communities, from Luzon to Visayas to Mindanao, from the different regions of the Philippines. And we realized that food security has been an issue ever since, but it is not given the enough attention that is needed because everyone thinks that it is just a simple problem, but we all know that it is not. It is a very big factor on the different problems, especially in education, because when everyone is not aware of what is happening around them, if everyone is not given the enough knowledge that they need and they are not aware of what is happening or what might happen, they are easily influenced and they have been a victim of fake news and such. That's why through UNED Philippines have been using the social media platform. We are maximizing its capacity because we believe that most of the youth, the students are currently in social media right now. So we have launched different webinars, different live sessions, such as Kalampag. Kalampag at Ampag ng Kabataan sa gitna ng COVID-19. It literally translates to rattle and contribution of youth in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic. So the goal of Kalampag is to make an avenue for the audience real-time engagement. They can interact more with the resource speaker and their fellow viewers in real time via comment section. We are committed to, by making Kalampag, we are committed to monitor and evaluate our activities. The analytics tracking platform of Facebook Live streaming give us an avenue to track our performance. And it is undeniable that COVID-19 pandemic changes the course of our lives. Now more than ever, UNED Philippines recognize the importance of information drive amidst the crisis. Hence, it maximizes the platform to live stream its webinars into the digital social media space world. Also,
thank you, Charie, for providing your important insight and sharing your experiences. This is a question for both Rantia and Charie. How has COVID-19 impacted mental health specifically for students during the pandemic? And what do you think is needed to ensure that access to mental health support is provided for students and youth around the world, and especially in emergency settings? So due to time constraints, we'll limit this discussion probably 1 to 2 minutes, and we can start with Rantia.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to have a brief introduction in redefining the mental health in Palestine. In Palestine, mental disorders are disregarded as a stressful events, disregarded in comparison to the bigger picture the individual is in and in connection to the political situation, given the context that Palestinians live in and the importance of fighting for your existence, freedom, and literal being can sometimes clash with defining your mental health as a personal issue, which cannot be addressed at the moment because this suffering or struggle is for the cause, and you're not the only one who is going through this some way or the other. So during COVID, and I think we can all share that COVID had a huge impact on our mental health, but it also started a global conversation on the importance of it as well. This can be said the same in Palestine, but not to everyone, specifically students and youth who didn't have access to information, tools, or resources. So many have struggled, but couldn't have been able to share their experience, talk about it, or even ask for help. So I think, so we have to realize that we needed to reinvent and reuse the tools that we have in our hands, specifically during COVID. So a lot of organizations in Palestine and even activists for mental health realized that there's a powerful tool that we have, which is social media and technology. So the first step, in my opinion, is social media, to use it as advocacy and awareness raising on the importance of talking about and having this conversation on mental health, which is an important tool to destigmatize therapy and to ask for help and having this conversation. Secondly, I think working on building easy access tools for students and youth through technology that can be connected to a professional help and support is one of the main things that we can also manage through this tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Rantia. And over to you, Charie.
I can relate with what Rantia said because here in the Philippines and most, I think, in Asian countries, mental health is not really recognized. When you said that you were experiencing these things and that, and when you tell it to someone, they will just basically say that, oh, it's on your head, it's nothing, it's normal, you're just you're crazy. They would use that term. And but the COVID-19, it really affects the students so much, especially that the socialization is gone. They have no one else to talk to but their family. And as maybe we can admit or not, but pre-pandemic, school is our escape from family problems. But now that we are not allowed to go out that much, that is taken away from us, and it made it even worse. The mental health problem was been worse since the pandemic. But I also agree with Rantia when she said that since the COVID-19 pandemic happened, the mental health issue has been talked a lot. Here in the Philippines, mental health hotlines have been released on social medias. A lot of psychologists are offering their services for free, which I think is a very good thing. But we cannot deny the fact that mental health is still a continuing issue all globally. And I think I also do agree that we have to maximize the use of the social media platforms to do a lot of mental health webinars for the youth, because it is where the youth and the students are right now. And yeah, that's from my end.
Thank you so much, Rantia and Charie, for sharing some examples of great practice and priorities for psychosocial support to students, teachers, and youth worldwide. And I think we can all agree that COVID-19 really exposed the importance of this for education, support professionals, and for students as well. So now I would like to introduce a session on the importance of addressing girls' education in emergency settings, given that around 64 million girls and adolescents are living in conflicts, and as many as 20 million girls might never return to school as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this session will specifically focus on the role of civil society in ensuring that policies prioritize efforts for all girls to access and thrive in education. For this panel, we will be joined by Taibat, Hussain, and Diana Ayala. Taibat is a senior technical advisor on the Ford Foundation-funded Safe School Movement Project, which is a strategic intervention to strengthen CSO capacity to implement recommendations of the 4th International Conference of the Safe Schools Declaration. Diana works with the Foro, Dakar, Honduras, which is based in Honduras, and also with the Latin American Campaign for the Right to Education, or CLADE. She is a Global Partnership for Education youth leader and has worked for advocating for girls with disabilities and from rural areas to complete 12 years of school, which is one of the biggest gender equality issues in Honduras. So Taibat, let's start off with you and hear about the work that you're doing to advance girls' education in Nigeria and around the world. And if in your discussion, if you could please also share how we can improve gender inclusive perspectives in the planning, budgeting, and implementation of emergency response plans, and especially when it comes to ensuring education in conflicts.
Thank you so much, Pai. Thank you. So I would like to provide a context. As of the beginning of 2020, 935 schools in Northeast Nigeria had been closed due to attacks and conflict. We know that schools are among the worst hit when it comes to emergencies, as evidenced by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Boko Haram insurgencies, and the several attacks on Nigerian communities, which have all compounded the problems that many girls face in consistently accessing schooling. Specifically in Nigeria, schoolgirls have been directly attacked due to religious and ideological opposition to girls' education. All this calls for improved education response during emergencies. And in a bid to put into action recommendations from the 4th International Conference on Safe School Declaration, my organization, the Development Research and Project Center, is implementing the Safe School Movement Project with funding from the Ford Foundation. This project seeks to support a dynamic collective of civil society organizations to conduct step-down workshops and trainees on the Safe School Declaration and recommendations. We have collaborated with the Nigerian Education in Emergencies Working Group and UNICEF to convene a 3-day step-down training workshop for about 31 civil society organizations across Nigeria to transfer demonstrable skills, knowledge, and practice, and also, to empower the civil society to mount advocacy to their state governments, to the ministries of education, to the agencies on school safety. We have supported the CSO to also implement safe school activities at the community level across the 6 geopolitical zones that we have in the country. This is to increase the skills of school administrators, community leaders, and parents, because all this group of people have a role to play when we have the issue of conflict, wars, insurgencies, and to also, enhance the capacity of the school stakeholders on school emergency response plan. And this month, we put out a call to, indigenous CSO in the country working on education, most especially girls' education, to apply for our training and also small grants to carry out, safe school activities at the grassroots level, and also to implement the recently launched national policy on safe, security, and violence-free schools in the country. This is our own way as an organization of ensuring that these policies are not just policies, but they are well actioned, and making sure that schools are safe for all, especially for girls, so that their education can continue even during emergencies. We understand the issue clearly based on the data available, and we as an organization, we are solving it sustainably through the power of collaboration and integrating, local actors, getting the buy-in and commitment of the grassroots CSOs, community leaders, religious leaders, and the parents. In terms of how can we improve gender perspective, we know that it is important to proactively integrate an inclusive and gender responsive perspectives when it comes to planning, budgeting, and implementation of any emergency response plan. And we're doing this just to ensure that the most vulnerable, especially the girls, can continue to learn even at the time of this crisis. For instance, in Nigeria, I know that we have the Education in Emergency Working Group to coordinate, equitable deployment of education resources for populations affected by this crisis. Their focus, however, is mostly in the Northeast region of the country. But we must begin to shift from just children affected by war, attacks, and insurgencies in one region to actually developing an holistic plan that addresses all forms of emergencies, just like the mental health, everything that's just been mentioned across the country. Also, I believe it is important to ensure that the participation of girls and young women in the decision-making areas tied to education, because this affects them. So they must be involved. We must get them involved. Also critical is, involving communities and the parents to ensure that most of these vulnerable children have access to education in emergencies interventions, particularly in the remote and marginalized areas. Failure to incorporate a gender-responsive approach into any education in emergency plans as a high cost, not just for these girls, but for the policymakers, for the communities, and the development actors. Okay, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taibat, for your insightful presentation. You are really, truly an example for youth education and gender equality champions everywhere, and the work that you do in Nigeria, but also as an advocate, as a global advocate, is so important to support girls' education. I'd like to ask you a quick question, and we'll keep this to 1 to 2 minutes if you can, on how we can ensure and how civil societies organizations can ensure that the implementation of emergency response plans are gender inclusive and transformative. I think you're muted, Taibat.
Okay, so thank you very much. Like I said, the government has a lot to do, but most importantly, the civil society has a lot to do. And like Yasmine has said, the girls are the most affected by conflict, by insurgencies. So whenever it comes to, you know, education in emergency interventions, we must begin to apply a gender lens. We must begin to be considerate of how this issue affects the girls. We know that the girls are already facing a huge barrier to their education, even without the emergency. We have the cultural norms, the social barrier, the ideological barrier to girls accessing education, which is worsened by crisis, by insurgency. So as civil society organization, we must come together. We must pool resources together. And that is why the Safe School Movement project is very critical at this point, because we're mobilizing this group of CSO in a strategic way and training them to provide step-down training to these schools in the community to prepare them for cases of attacks and insurgencies, because these are very common in Nigeria, especially in the Northeast. So we're coming together to pool resources together, to mobilize ourselves together, to understand what are the emergency response plan we have on ground, what are the policies on ground, what are the recommendations, and begin to translate these recommendations into action. So I believe when we're doing that, we should also be conscious of, you know, how this crisis affect the different gender, and take a gender lens, a gender responsive and a gender sensitive approach to any interventions and programs that we might be developing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taibat. It's really a testament to the importance of collective action and the impact that can have. So now I'd like to pass it over to Diana to share an overview of your work to protect the right to education in Honduras, especially for students with disabilities, and implementing gender and disability inclusive perspectives in education planning.
Hi, thank you. My name is Diana Ayala. I am from Honduras, and as Pirina said, I'm from Foro, Dakar, Honduras, and also part of the Latin American campaign for the right of education. And there are different things that we do actually at my coalition to ensure that we help to advance and to move forward with the human right for education. So we have different actions on the past few years and that we're continuing to do, and most of them are advocacy actions at a political level. So right now we are working on a law initiative for more financing of education, and this law initiative, it was created last year. We introduced it with some congressmen and congresswomen from the National Congress, and since we had a change of government, we're trying to do this with the new government and try to make this initiative to actually become a policy in the country. We have the education sector plan, but we have to revise everything because since the pandemic, many things have changed. Some of the other things that were before not very addressed as key issues that we need to achieve. Now they're becoming more and more, and they're increasing. So we have these initiative that we're working with, and it's important because we built this with civil society. So we did a consultation, we worked with different organizations, and even though they didn't have education as their main objective or as their main key area of work, they had in common, and we agree all that education is substantial to continue moving forward to sustainable development. So different organizations from different work areas agree on having this initiative, and we're working with civil society to become this a law and to become to make this a policy. So we work with different organizations. Foro Dakar, it's basically works with more than 23 different organizations. We have indigenous group, we have people with disabilities, organizations that work for the human right for education with people with disabilities to be actually integrated in the regular system and not be segregated in different learning centers. So we work with one organization that it's for that they're protecting the right of education for people with disabilities. And we actually, whenever we work in everything we do, and every research we do, investigation and everything, we actually include them to be active on what we're doing, and they can like revise every document, every action we do, and make sure that they are included and their needs are being included on what we're doing. And actually we're working right now also with different organizations, with 80 different organizations and 40 local governments, on making advocacy on different projects and programs that the government is implementing, and making sure, for example, we have a project that is being implemented right now specifically for initial education, and we are trying to make sure with the organization, with local governments, that these schools that are being that are about to be built, they have the physical spaces that will attend the needs of every kid and every girl, and to actually have teachers that are well trained to attend the needs of different kids, and not having parents with low incomes and families that they don't have the economical capacity to actually be paying several amount of money to have kids being attended on different schools or different or specialized centers, because we actually are doing advocacy to have these included on the national policy in the public education system, to actually have trained teachers and the physical centers, to have kids being included in the system and teachers being able to attend the needs of everyone, but the government's giving tools to teachers to attend the needs of all the kids.
Thank you so much, Diana. Let's move into our discussion now. So I will ask a question, and Taibat and Diana, if you could please respond, and try to keep your responses to 1 to 2 minutes, because we're running a little bit short on time. So considering that this is the Global Action Week for Education, if we could walk away with one key action to recommend to our governments, to your governments, to advance disability inclusive education and girls' education, what would that recommendation be? We can start with you, Diana.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll try to summarize these and let me know if I'm taking too much time. I think there are different things that we can do, but I'll be like very short on them. One is to actually include civil society on political dialogues, to create the spaces to actually have the voices of the civil society included on the policy making. Also to include the needs not only about one sector, but the voices of all the marginalized groups. Another thing is to build policies that are response to the needs of the country and its people, and not to create models that are not from our context, to actually build models that are adequate to our context. It is okay to learn from other successful experiences, but we actually need to build our way and know that our way is the actual way we need to achieve these things. And last, I think governments must consider the needs of girls and the challenges that girls face at all levels. This means that from budgeting to implementation to curriculum development, girls in rural areas and girls living with disabilities. To do this effectively, they have to first listen to girls and value their voices and experiences. And that is the only way we truly start to address the barriers that girls also face, and that people with disabilities and the indigenous groups also.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just write on what Diana said. I strongly believe inclusive education is the most effective way to give all children a fair chance to go to school, to learn and develop the skills they need to thrive. In clear terms, we can all collectively take actions by engaging our policymakers, parliamentarians, private sector to fund disability inclusive and girl child education. We know that the lack of funding is a cog in the wheel of progress for sustainable education. So if the funding challenge can be removed, it will go a long way in solving other issues. I also believe that we need to activate the leave no behind mantra. We all have a role to play and should collectively work with other active partners and players, offer suggestions, attend events, and also make sacrifices. And I'll just add this, because we're in the era of digital, we need to also leverage on social media to tell stories on the need for, funding girls' education, disability inclusive education. The power of hashtag should also be leveraged on in order to engage and create awareness. We know that change will not happen immediately, but collaboratively we can achieve a whole lot together. Education is never a right, is a right and not a privilege, and disability inclusive girl child education cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Taibat and Diana, so much for your insights, for your presentations, and I'm seeing a common theme here about the role and power of social media and youth voices to generate change and impact. So I think you both are clear examples of that. And so now we'll move on into the next section of our meeting. We're really excited and delighted to add key insights from one of our newest coalition members of GCE-US, who is making a real difference in the advancement of rights for individuals with disabilities. So Krista, I will pass it over to you to introduce our newest coalition member.
Thank you so much, Parina, and thank you so much to everyone who spoke today. We're so inspired by these remarks, and we really believe that if it implemented, everything that you said can create real change. As mentioned, we are a coalition. We are effective thanks to the partnership of all of our coalition members. And we have more than 80 coalition members in the Global Campaign for Education US who are committed to quality, inclusive education for all. So if you are interested, or if one of your partners is interested in joining the coalition, please feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. Today, we're delighted to introduce Bob Lubega, who is the Executive Director of Rights for Disability Development Foundation based in Uganda, to hear a bit about their organization and the background. Over to you, Bob, and warm welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well and see you well. Thank you.
My name's Bob Lubega, and I'm working with the Rights for Disability Development Foundation as Executive Director, the organization based here in Uganda. Our presentation is going to go as follows. First of all, we are going to start with the introduction, then our vision and mission, objectives, programs, experiences, lessons, and good development practices. Then the last one will be the conclusion. The introduction, Rights for Disability Development Foundation, started in 2013 with 14 members of different disabilities. Its aim was, and still is, to advocate for the protection and promotion of the human rights for persons with disabilities in Uganda, while also transforming their livelihoods in line with UNCRPD and Sustainable Development Goals. So why we started this RDDF, it's because, first of all, when I was still young, I used to face many challenges during education, also getting fees for my school. I used to see some schools were not accessible for me. Even some of our parents, they don't want to pay school fees for children with disabilities. That's why when I saw that there is a lot of challenges among we people with disabilities, that's why I call upon my colleagues with disabilities to form up this organization so that we can protect and promote their human rights. Then our vision state like this: health and productive person with disabilities whose universal rights and freedoms are protected and respected by society. The mission: to work with partners to promote research in the area of disability, carry out awareness and policy advocacy, and make strategic interventions in specific areas for long-term inclusion of persons with disabilities. Our objectives, there are 4 objectives. One is to promote unity and cooperation among members. 2, advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities and to reduce discrimination and stigma. 3, improve the livelihoods of persons with disabilities. Then 4, ensure the broader social inclusion of persons with disabilities in society. Our programs goes as follows. 1, quality inclusive education. In quality inclusive education, we try to advocate for inclusion of children, persons with disabilities in education programs. Then, and also establishing accessible structures in schools for learners with disabilities at all ages. We also promote and supporting multi-skilled vocational education for youth with disabilities. We support children with disabilities with the necessary resources to join, participate, and complete quality education programs. And lastly, sensitizing and interesting heads of schools in mainstream society to include children, stroke persons with disabilities in learning programs at all levels. Then we also enabling persons or children with disabilities to access and benefit from quality inclusive WASH facilities in schools and promote awareness raising among policymakers at the local, national, and international levels about the importance of inclusive education for children or persons with disabilities and society as a whole. Then another programs we have human rights and advocacy, health and well-being, economic empowerment and livelihoods, inclusive WASH, and lastly, sports and recreation. We are very sorry, we are not going to go detail in all these programs because of the time. Then our core values goes as follows: respecting self and others, putting humanity first, and ensuring a solid team spirit within RDDF and between RDDF and its stakeholders. The second, upholding openness and honesty to attain timely transparency and accountability. And thirdly, advancing dependability to optimize efficient, effective, and impacting service delivery. And fourth, upholding beneficence to minimize permissive, diversionary resource deployment and utilization. Then lastly, appreciating and practicing professional courtesy to celebrate while safeguarding human, material, and financial resources at RDDF's disposal. So I have my colleague whom we are working with as a program promoter. He's going to present the last package for RDDF.
Thank you, Bob. Once again, my name is Wanakwakwa Job, working as with RDDF as a programs promoter. Next is the issue of RDDF experiences, lessons, and good development practices. In terms of experiences, we were inspired to start RDDF after noting that most persons with disabilities in Uganda were not being included in the development programs such as education, health, WASH, etc. The lessons we have learned are that one, once children with disabilities are given the support they require, they can perform so well, be it in education and in any other field. Two, when parents of children with disabilities and community members learn that organizations of persons with disabilities or OPDs in a particular area are active in the development process, they become encouraged and inspired to expose and support these children. Three, government of Uganda has come up with very good policies and laws on inclusive education and development for persons, stroke children with disabilities, but it has not allocated the required sufficient resources to implement these policies and laws in order to attain inclusive society. Four, most learning institutions, that is from pre-primary to university levels in Uganda, do not have teachers who are skilled in special needs education or five, schools are inaccessible to children or learners with disabilities. On its part, RDDF has adopted and is utilizing several good development practices, which among others include 6, and these include 1, supporting children or learners with disabilities to join and remain in school until they complete their designated study programs. 2, supporting multiple vocational skilling to ensure quicker access to jobs and job creation by youth or persons with disabilities. 3, facilitating the sensitization and training of parents of children or learners with disabilities and community members to realize and appreciate the potentials of persons stroke learners with disabilities and support them to participate in developing themselves, their families, communities, their country, Uganda, and the world at large. 4, establishing and sustaining model accessible structures and other disability-friendly facilities that government, civil society, and the private sector could adopt and utilize on a sustainable basis for the benefit of persons with disabilities in Uganda to support policy formulation or policy statements, policy implementation, and policy advancement. 5, RDDF is now searching for collaborative partners so that together they could jointly support the training of SNE teachers, that is special needs education teachers, to promote quality inclusive education on a bigger scale in Uganda. 6, and last, RDDF has embarked on establishing accessible structures to benefit children with disabilities as a starting point for establishing accessible structures for all learners with disabilities at all levels of education in Uganda. I here now invite Bob to take us through the conclusive remarks. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, my colleague Job. Let me take to this conclusion part. As of now, for RDDF celebrates its continued existence and hopes to be of variable use of support to persons with disabilities in Uganda in the near future and even beyond. So as RDDF, we call upon all our colleagues who are out there and our partners and other members in the global campaign for education so that we could put up a partnership or joint partnership so that we can support our youth with disabilities and other children with disabilities in Uganda. Please, whoever who want to ask us some questions or anything you wanted to know about RDDF, you can go to www.gce-us.org/rights-for-disability-development-foundation. You'll be getting us, you'll get our contacts there, and we shall be welcome to have you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you so much for these inspiring remarks, for the inspiring work you're doing to promote inclusive quality education for all children and youth. We've put the link to your website in the chat, and unfortunately we are a bit tight on time at the moment, so maybe we can have people ask you questions in the chat or follow up with you via email. We do want to just reiterate that this is the Global Action Week for Education. It's an annual week celebrating inclusive quality education for all and affirming children's right to quality education. So we'll paste the campaign pack for GAWE, or the Global Action Week for Education, here in the chat. We invite you all to get involved. Please share the messages via your social media accounts and help spread the word about this. We also would like to, I'll pass it over to Stephanie to talk about the upcoming Inclusive Education and Early Childhood Community of Practice event.
Thank you, Krista. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Pena, and I am the Inclusive Education Coordinator for GCE-US, and we're very happy to have you here today. I personally would like to invite you to join our community of practice, our Inclusive Education and Early Childhood Community of Practice. We meet bi-monthly, and we discuss best practices regarding inclusive education and early childhood development. The chat, we will be putting the link to the chat to join the community of practice right now. And we also have our next meeting will be on May 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Apologies for those of you in, that might not be the best time, but it's the best that we could do. May 13th, we're really excited. We'll be having Catherine Gersney, the Disability Rights Coordinator with USAID, and other really exciting presentations. So please join us. And once again, thank you to all of our speakers today. This has been such an incredible meeting, and happy Galway week, everyone.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And just to reiterate, like we did at the beginning of the call, for those of you based in the US and who have US government contacts, we encourage you to take action and contact your US representatives and senators to fully fund global education. And we've also, the READ Act, the reauthorization of the READ Act was recently introduced for an additional 5 years. So we'll put resources to both support the READ Act and fully funding education in fiscal year 2023 in the chat. Thank you so much to all of you for joining today and for your inspiring remarks and for the many ways in which you are promoting inclusive quality education for all children and youth around the world. Thanks to you.
Thank you, everyone.